Recording started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk about how building the DevOps SaaS from scratch. In a Gallery example, we have two amazing co-founders of Gallery, YC, backed up, Jagat and Vignesh, who have years of experience working in big companies, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, and I'm sure there are many other side projects and companies they worked on. And they're gonna put all these together and show us or present in next 1 hour and a half how they apply all these and build a company Gallery from scratch. So once again, thank you guys so much for joining. Once again, it's my birthday today, and it's one of the best gifts I could get today and learning from you. So thank you. Today, the agenda is pretty much simple and same, and we gonna, sorry about once again for the Zoom link, and we are still on time. I'm gonna pass the floor to you in a bit, and depending on how you feel, you may want to take a break, but in case anyone can take any time to break, it's all good. And then we're gonna have Q&A. Again, we are small groups, so we will take a live questions if you have any. If not, we will have also shared the contact details. You could reach out to Jagat, Vignesh to learn about Gallery, or in general, if you have any question based on the presentation they're gonna share. So about the GoUp, we are hosting this community-driven open source accelerator. We are hosting events, and we are bringing amazing folks who are talking about pretty much the open, because DevOps, there are so many open source projects, and putting all things together and the technological pieces. Same time, heavily on the DevOps, we're gonna focus on this chapter, this SaaS products as well, because we get a lot of feedback from the community in general, questions about the DevOps. So probably this chapter gonna be heavily focused also on DevOps piece and SaaS, because whenever you start your own open source or in general, and there are so many SaaS platforms you need to connect together and use, and definitely Gallery is gonna be one, because one of the things folks mentioned that once I talked to Jagat and Vignesh, so they have this also option for the open source project. So definitely will be worth to get started. So for the chit chat, I'm gonna post in the chat the link, the Jamboard. This is gonna be if you have any questions or what you want to learn from webinar, in case it will help our speakers to make sure that they can cover the points or questions you have. So it's not mandatory, it's optional. Same time, you can post in our Zoom chat as well. So whatever you feel comfortable, or raise your hand and ask questions. So code of conduct is simple. We never really had any issue with code of conduct, but just in case, worth to repeat. Learn, benefit, contribute. We are here for that, no marketing, and equality despite roles and background. And now I'm gonna stop sharing and pass the microphone to you guys. Once again, we are excited, thrilled, honored to have you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the intro, Sako. Yeah, I think honestly, before I get started, if you guys, Azay and Vicky, would be open to quick intros about yourselves, I'd love to learn a bit more about the people I'm talking to. Of course, I know about Sako and Vignesh. Yeah, help me just make sure I'm kind of getting everything that you both want to hear. But if not, no worries. I can go through, and you can let me know on the Jamboard. If there are any points you want me to hit.
Hello again. Of course, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate your time here, and I'm looking forward to hear from you. I'm Azay, and I'm from Azerbaijan. I worked in Azerbaijan as a Linux system engineer, mainly focused on Linux administration. But here now I'm in Poland, Krakow based, and I work for Cisco in the security team. My future plan is switch to DevOps. So today I'm here to learn about some interesting stuff from you. And I hope this webinar will be really good. Thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I am Vicky from India. I am currently a student from BTech. I am currently learning about development, but my interest also lies on DevOps. So I am here to get some insights about DevOps, and so thank you.
Great, great, great. Yeah, thank you both for letting me know. And yeah, please feel free to chip in anytime during the talk. Ask me any question.
Yeah.
And yeah. Let's see here. Let me quickly start sharing. How does this work? Great. Are you seeing the presentation, or is it the other view?
Presentation,
Okay, cool.
current slide, next slide. Yeah.
Oh, let me see here. Let me change to there. Great. So yeah, today I'll be talking about building a DevOps SaaS from scratch. Subtitle here is Stories and Observations from the Guy in Your Spam Folder. The reason behind that is, most people who kind of are currently working in DevOps have probably gotten some sort of marketing email from me in their LinkedIn or their spam folder or something. And so this is kind of putting the human behind all of the marketing messaging there. And I think, at least one person in the audience here can attest to that. I actually, got the speaking opportunity through Sako, and I sent him a marketing message. But he took the time to get to know me and to learn more about what we were building. So yeah, yeah, so I guess starting out, right? The questions you probably have, the questions I had until yesterday really are, let me see how to use this keynote thing. Yeah, firstly, who am I, right? What do I know? And could Sako really not find someone better, right? And so the answers to at least the first two can be found probably in Sako's blurb here, right? But this is kind of a dry answer, right? So we're the co-founders of Gallery. We're a startup that just went through YCombinator. We provide cloud environments as a service on any cloud provider. And before this, we spent brief stints in different tech companies and doing quantitative finance. And we were roommates at Caltech, where we studied computer science. Now, as far as what to focus on here, right? The sales side of me wants to focus on this. The fact that we provide environments as a service on any cloud provider and to try to sell to each of you and make a quick buck. But I think as far as actually providing value here, I'm going to focus the talk on this. What we did before we started Gallery, what led to us actually starting this, and kind of, I think, more importantly, YC, right? Like the things we learned about startups through Y Combinator and the lessons that, we wish we had known before we started the startup journey, that, Y Combinator kind of taught us through tons of failures and talks and things like that. And so really what I'm going to center this talk around is a lot of the interesting and kind of counterintuitive lessons of startup building, right? That I got through this, over 1 year journey so far, and all the challenges that, we're still facing right now that I never thought I would face. And I think this is really valuable to anybody who would ever think of starting a startup, right? Because I think the perceptions of startups that people have outside of startups are so different from the kind of lived experiences you have trying to bootstrap something. And so today I'll kind of be talking about our story founding this DevOps product through the lens of kind of these 4 steps to a startup that we've kind of honed in on a lot over the past few months and over the past year. The first one is getting an idea. The second one is guessing if your idea is any good. The third one is using that to build something that people might want. And the fourth one is, doing what startups are meant to do, raise and make money. And all of these at first sight seem somewhat obvious, right? Everybody who has a startup idea thinks it's really good. Nobody's going to build something that people don't want. And of course, nobody's going to try to build something that won't make money. But you'd be surprised how many startups fail just on these 4 bullets. I'd argue that probably the vast majority of startups fail within the first 3 bullets. And the vast majority of ideas that Vignesh and I tried failed within the first 3 bullets. And so I'll go into kind of why that is and how that led us to Gallery and why we think Gallery is the one that really hits that 4th bullet. So the first part here is getting an idea. Right? I think that's kind of the holy grail question of the Bay Area or tech in general. What's a good startup idea? And I honestly don't know. So don't expect to learn anything from me here. But I think there are ways that we've learned through Y-Combinator and through our own searches on how to find ideas that are better than others, especially for yourself. So the first major thing, right, is to start with the problem, not a solution. And so, throughout this, I'm going to tie this into our own startup journey, right, and how we ended up on Gallery. So starting with a problem, not a solution, goes back to the very first startup idea Vignesh and I had, right, which was let's build a kind of a decentralized blockchain-based ledger for identity, right? It sounded really cool, right? It's one of those things that you read on Hacker News or has all the buzzwords you could want, and in an ideal world, everybody would have their identity on some decentralized ledger instead of on these little ID cards, right? So of course, as bad founders, we built everything out. It was a massive code base. We were super excited. We launched it, and not a single person used it, right? And it was obvious why, right? I mean, who's going to randomly onboard onto a decentralized identity ledger? Nobody's even verifying these identities, right? Like it's not adopted by anywhere, right? And the next idea we tried, right, was I was going like online shopping or something, right? And I was learning about this whole Shopify ecosystem of apps. And I thought, what if it were possible for e-commerce store owners to ask customers questions directly on the site and then give them instant discounts and product recommendations through the answers for the questions, right? Now, on the surface, this sounds really exciting, right? It's like, oh, okay, now this sounds very useful, right? Every store owner could use this to learn about the customers on their site. And kind of like the same way in a real store, somebody go up to you and ask you questions, they can do this on their own virtual storefronts and recommend products. And on the surface, it looks like we weren't failing on the start with the problem, not a solution thing. But we were, because know that neither Vignesh or I have ever run an e-commerce store. Neither of us have ever experienced not knowing our customers, problems as a problem, right? Neither of us have ever wanted to ask questions to somebody buying shoes from us. Yet we just kind of guessed that that's something that people would want, right? And so yet again, we went on this journey. We spent 1 to 2 months. We built this all out. We made like a nice Shopify widget. We made like a data layer. We were going to add in some ML to do recommendations. And it was a great product. We put on the Shopify store. We mass contacted shops. We cold called every single store in Pasadena, which is where our college was. And yet again, not a single person used it. And this was confusing to us. I mean, it made sense, right? Like the product, who wouldn't want to ask customers questions? Who wouldn't want to give discounts? Who wouldn't want to increase their revenue? But the thing is, we weren't solving a problem. None of these store owners were actively trying to figure out ways to ask questions to their customers. And when you're not solving a problem, you're going to have a very hard time actually. Sorry, I think somebody joined the waiting room here. Is anybody able to admit them? I think my mouse is kind of weird.
I can take it. No worries.
Oh yeah, no worries. Hi, Nirlana. Thank you for joining.
Hello, it's a pleasure for me to join this session.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we just got started here. And yeah, we're kind of talking about the startup journey of getting an idea and making sure it's good and so on through the lens of all the failures and things we've done. And yeah, thank you so much for getting on. And please let me know if you have any questions, want to hear about certain things. And there's also a Jamboard, I believe, Sako has placed in the chat that you can kind of place in things you want to know. And yeah, so all of this to say, the best way to have a startup idea is not to come up with an idea, but to come up with a problem that you want to solve, like a problem that that people want solved, because that way you have a ready audience, right? If your solution works, then you have people who will be willing to use it. And so those are two of our first major failures, right? We spent many months building out these things where we had a solution in search of a problem. The next point here, right, is the best place to start is to solve your own problems, right? And so one failure here I can talk about is once we realized that we should be searching for problems, not just building solutions, we were like, okay, what are some big problems we could solve? And instead of asking ourselves, we went and tried to ask every single person we could but ourselves, right? So we emailed random startup founders everywhere asking like, what are your biggest headaches, right? There was one period of time when we randomly isolated the gig economy, right? So Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and DoorDash drivers. We were like, they must have a lot of problems. Let's figure out what they are. So we would book Ubers back to back every day. We would wake up, book Ubers to and from the local park, and on every ride, ask them questions. We'd ask them, what is your biggest problem? What are you facing? How do you manage your taxes? Things like that. And the thing is, that doesn't quite work. And I'll go into why in a second, right? When I talk about guessing if your idea is any good. But the main thing is, firstly, people are wary of anybody trying to start a startup for their own problems, right? If somebody came to you and said that they claim that they can make $1 billion trying to know more about your own life than you do, it's a bit of a weird proposition. And I think the second thing is, nobody knows the problems better than the people who have lived them, right? Somebody's going to tell you how their day is or how they manage their taxes or something like that. And it'll seem like a very convoluted workflow, when to them it really isn't, and it doesn't matter, right? And so really the best way to find a problem to solve is to solve your own problems. Find something that bugs you. Find something that if there were a solution you would pay for. Doesn't matter what the solution is. It's okay if you don't know a solution yet. But find something that is a pain for you. And then you'll be able to find some sort of solution within that space to solve. And then, so as far as all of this, right? One framework YCombinator gave us when we were trying to find a problem to solve was this idea of scoring ideas, right? They gave us this framework where they had 4 criteria. Each one we could rate from 1 to 10. And the one with the highest score would probably be the best idea that we had. And this is how we ended up on Gallery. But I'll go into that in a second as I go through this actual framework. And sorry, just one second. Let me check here. Let me just make sure. Is there anything on the Jamboard? Yeah, just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Great. Okay. Let me go back to the presentation. Okay. And so this is the exact framework they told us at Y Combinator. You score each of these 4 criteria from 1 to 10. So the first one is, how big of a market is this, right? And so market size is actually surprisingly important, right? Because when you create a pricing model, when you think about every single person you could get, if that number doesn't hit more than $100 million in annual revenue, then it isn't a business that can really be venture scale. It's something that can make you money, sure, but it can't really be something that's venture back and hit unicorn stage, right? And while this seems kind of obvious, like, oh, there's so many people in the world, right? Like, for example, if you're making a better kind of steak, then your market is every steak eater in the world. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, right? You have to think about how many people can you actually reach, right? How many people are in the market as far as buying something, right? And that number gets whittled down further and further as you think about it. And so one example of an idea that Vignesh and I had that failed on these fronts was, a way to, for example, like track your vitamin D, right? Which on the surface sounds like a reasonable idea. When you think about the number of people who have vitamin D deficiencies, are willing to actually get an app and actively use it, that market gets whittled down further and further to the point where the subscription cost would have to be pretty high for somebody to actually use it and for it to get to that cost, right? So one prominent angel investor, Eli Gill, often says that the only thing that matters in a startup idea is how big the market is. And so when we were, deciding what to work on, Gallery really stood out to us because DevOps is massive, right? As everybody in this conference knows, right? It's a space that changes constantly, right? I mean, there was Docker, there was Kubernetes. Now you have, GitHub releasing tons of things like GitHub Actions and code spaces. It's a space that's constantly shifting and a space that's constantly growing, right? And being able to productize the skills that everybody in DevOps offers to their clients, right, and offers to their companies, is a massive market and something that, is nowhere near where it should be yet. The second thing is founder market fit. And this goes along solving your own problems, right? And founder market fit just pretty much means how well do you know the space of the problem you're trying to solve? And this sounds obvious at first, right? But you'd be surprised how many of the first startup ideas, including our own, are solving for people they don't know at all, right? When we were trying to solve problems for e-commerce stores, when we'd never even set up a Shopify store before, or sold a single shoe or a piece of clothing, right? Because when you're missing founder market fit, you won't know whether you're solving the problem, right? You'll be misled. People will tell you this is a cool idea, but then when it comes time to actually pay, it's never going to happen, right? So founder market fit is also incredibly important. Thirdly is how easy is it to get started, right? And so for Gallery, this one was actually not scored very high, right? We had to build a number of prototypes. We had to talk to a number of clients who had different kind of bespoke infrastructures and bespoke setups before we could get somebody to actually onboard onto the platform. And so most people kind of push this one to the side because it feels like, okay, the harder it is to get started, the more of a moat I have, the harder it is for other people to enter into my space. But the thing is, until you get started, you don't know how good your idea is, because the best way to tell if your idea is good is to have people use it, right? And if you can't have people use your idea, then the entire time you're waiting for that idea to get used, it could be a complete failure and you won't know. And lastly, the early market feedback. And this one goes without saying, just what are people saying about the product when they're using it? Is it actually solving their problem, right? And so this takes something as nebulous as like finding a good startup idea and turns it into what's a number I can get for every single startup idea that I can possibly do, and how can I choose the best number? And all of this to say, when Vignesh and I were going through YCombinator near the beginning, we realized our e-commerce idea was a failure and we needed to get a new idea fast. And so what we did is we went through every lived experience we'd had, right? We wrote down every problem we'd ever experienced, and we had no judgment. It didn't matter if the problem was small or big. Didn't matter if something was solvable or not. It could be something as big as climate change. It could be something as small as tying your shoes, right? Just every problem we could think of. We tried to hit at least 50 of these. Then we chose 10 that both of us had experience with and that seemed pretty big. Then we brainstormed every possible solution to those problems, right? And again, it didn't matter how far-fetched these solutions were. And finally, we scored each of these solutions with a rubric. And then Gallery came out on top. And to go into why Gallery came out on top and how Gallery even became an idea for us, right? So when I worked at Facebook, we had this flow of on-demand environments, right? So essentially what that meant is whenever I was coding, I could click a button that was called on demand and immediately see my code deployed to a live preview, right? And this was a live preview I could share with other engineers. It was hosted on Facebook's own infrastructure, and it made everything very seamless, right? I was able to immediately share with the other stakeholders. I was able to see how my features were updating, and I was able to not clog on like a staging environment or something like that. Fast forward to when Vignesh and I were trying to just put out a ton of random ideas as we were building. We found that pretty much every single time we were going to launch, we would clash on staging, something would break, we'd have to reverse course and figure out what went wrong. And so the seed for the problem, right, was we need a better way to manage environments, right? We want to be able to programmatically manage environments. We want to be able to have the flows of these big tech companies. And that wasn't a solution yet, right? That was just some sort of like nebulous idea of dealing with environments is really frustrating. We want to have a better way to do it. And then we brainstormed all the possible solutions as we could, right? And the one we settled on was, creating a way to spin up environments on demand. And that, of all of our ideas, was the one that really spoke to us, because I think one of the biggest things there was we had founder market fit. We were engineers by trade, and we knew how it felt to have a great solution here. Whereas for our e-commerce product, for products for Uber drivers, for all those things, we didn't. And that's always a major blocker. So I guess everything I'm saying here, it probably seems pretty obvious, but in practice, most people just fail it even though they know it, because we did that too. And the main lesson here is just build for yourself, because then you'll know when you have a good solution. And before I move on to the next part, which is guessing if the idea you chose is any good, happy to kind of pause, take questions. I know a few people joined, so yeah, I don't know if they have too much context on what I was talking about, but yeah.
I just one plus, Jared, what you said. I think it was similar for GoUp, that I wanted to learn from the great people and at the same time share. That I think that's how you resonate. The way you're saying that, build for yourself, coming up, and that's really resonated on that. So it's
absolutely
easier to solve your own problem. And we had also these job hacks for hiring piece, and when was going through that all these challenges, that's how also came, and it's really nice to get validation. Thank you.
No, yeah, thank you. Great. So yeah, guessing if your idea is any good, right? So essentially you came up with something, right? Let's say you want to make, Uber for plumbers. You can order a plumber right away, something like that, right? And in theory, that sounds good, right? I mean, everybody needs a plumber. Everybody has a phone. Uber for plumbers sounds like a home run idea. How do you know if that idea is any good? Great. Why doesn't it exist yet? Maybe it does. I don't know. The main thing, of course, is ask customers, right? Ask the people who would be using this product and figure out if they've used it. But the thing is, it's not as easy as this, right? Because there's something called the mom test. So the mom test is a book. It's an amazing book. I think everybody should read it. It's very short, very quick to read. But the premise of the book is never ask your mom if your business is a good idea, because she will lie to you. And the thing is, everybody will lie to you. This is something we found out painfully. We went to every single Shopify store owner we could find when we were making an e-commerce app. And we would ask them, do you think this is a good idea? And without fail, every single one of them would say, yeah, it seems cool, right? That is not validation. When you are asking customers, you are trying to not taint the process as much as you can, right? So I think one analogy they use in the book is you're an archaeologist and you're kind of like uncovering a skull or a fossil or something, right? You want to try to see the fossil without breaking it, right? In the same way, you want to try to prod the person you're asking. You're trying to prod the potential customer without leading them along a line of logic that makes them like your product. Because at the end of the day, you want them to be critical. You want them to say no, so you know that your product isn't good, right? And so for all of this, firstly, you need to ask, don't tell. Don't tell them what you're building. Don't tell them what the problem you're trying to solve is. Ask them about their experiences, because the gold standard is when unprompted, they will name the problem you're trying to solve. If you ask them what's frustrating you today, what are the biggest priorities you have, and they name the problem that you're solving right now, that's golden, because that means that tons of other people are also thinking about this problem without you talking to them. So whenever you're doing a line of, customer research, always base it off of questions and don't base it off of your product. And as I said, learn their problems unprompted, right? So you really want to find out the things that are bugging them and the things that they're trying to actively solve, right? And yeah, and so when people give you problems unprompted, that means that these are things that are actually bugging them and things that they'll probably buy. But that leads you to the next point, which is people will make up problems when you want to solve them. So one of the major things that's happened to us, and for any of you who've ever tried to do this and start a startup, you'll ask people like, what are all your problems? Like, tell me, we're trying to start a startup, right? And they'll come up with things that have honestly never bothered them before, just because they're trying to really rack their brains to come up with a problem, right? And to see why this is the case, like, I implore each of you, like, I'll ask you right now, like, what are the biggest problems you're facing right now? Like, tell me right now, right? And you're probably gonna think like, oh, I guess it took a long time to do the dishes today. Or, I guess when I woke up, I was still feeling really tired or something like that. But these aren't hair on fire problems. These aren't things that you're trying to build solutions yourself for. These are just things that annoy you, right? And really that leads to the dichotomy of a need to have solution versus a want to have. This is one of the things that really plagues trying to come with a good idea, because often you'll build something that people would want to have, but not need to have. And if you want to build something that people will actually use, it has to be a need to have. Yeah. Sorry. And kind of one final thing along guessing if your idea is any good and talking to customers, always seek payment, right? So if you're building something and somebody's like, yeah, it's a cool idea, right? And then you're going to feel really enthused and just want them to use it, right? And give it to them for free. Don't do that, right? The point of your product is to make money. And to make money, you need people to be willing to put in some commitment. You need them to have some sort of measure of how much they want this. If people aren't willing to pay for your product, but they say they'd be glad to use it, that's a red flag, right? That's people being nice to you. That's your mom telling you your business is a good idea, right? But at the end of the day, you want people to have skin in the game. You want to ask the uncomfortable questions and still have them be willing to use the product. The moment somebody is willing to pay for something, that's when you know you have an idea that might be good. And that alone is really the qualifying criteria, is somebody is willing to pay for your product. Yeah. And so the next section here really is how you can build something that people might want once you think you have an idea that seems golden, that people might pay for. And yeah, before I go on here, are there any questions? Anything anybody wants me to dive deeper into?
I had a question, Jared, regarding the payment piece. But then in the beginning, people may hesitate. So how you solve that they see the value and then they go to the...
Yeah, so that's the tough thing, right? Because one reason people may not want to pay is that, you know, they haven't even seen the product yet, right? They don't even know what it's going to do for them. In theory, they want the solution, right? But I think 99% of potential customers may be like that. You need to find at least one customer who this is so hair on fire for that they're willing to at least have some sort of commitment to a payment, like a letter of intent or something like that, right? And kind of like, you know, when fundraising, one of the main signals people use is how many letters of intent do you have? And the thing about letters of intent is they're completely non-binding. It's just a letter that says, if this existed, I might want to buy it. But having somebody at least talk about money means that they're serious about using a solution instead of trying to make you feel better or have some sort of intellectual discussion about a problem, right? And so this is the hardest part, right? I mean, I think, you know, kind of backtracking here and relating all this to the DevOps SaaS that we're bootstrapping, right? We talked to tons of engineers, tons of DevOps people, and we heard hundreds of different solutions they wanted for how to manage their environments, right? Everything from some people wanted like superhuman for DevOps, where they could like in a few clicks do things on their GCP or AWS. You know, some people wanted better cost management. Some people wanted, you know, a whole host of things. But then when we tried to seek payment, right, most people would kind of back off, right? They'd be like, maybe like if this did exist, I would take a look at it and then buy it or something like that. But nobody seemed to have a real hair on fire problem there. But one thing we found in a lot of cases was that people were trying to figure out how to avoid bottlenecks on their existing environments. And that was something we were able to get people to talk about payment for. And that was why we ended up going down that route. And, you know, I think one big thing here, right, is that I want to preface everything with is Vignesh and I are still very early on our startup journey, right? I mean, we just went through YCombinator. We're just having our initial customers. You know, there's a good chance even Gallery may not quite be the right approach to take. But, you know, I think I've seen a lot of the easy ways to fail here. And that's sort of what I'm communicating today. And I think if Gallery does fail, it'll be a more complicated failure. So worst case, that'll be a more interesting lesson than these, for sure. But every single slide I've made here is some failure that Vignesh and I have made in the past year.
Nice. I have also the... Yeah, Azra, go ahead.
I also want to ask one thing. For example, if you are going to build this kind of startup, did you set any time in the beginning? Did you set any timeline? Or, for example, I'm going to build this startup for 1 year, during 1 year and or 2 years, or it depends how it will go. And the second question is that building a startup, for example, it requires lots of work, like not only the technical side, also the marketing and etc. and lots of this stuff. And do you have a team, some kind of team, or you are just with Vignesh? And I think you got the question.
Yeah. So I can take both of those in turn. So the first one you said is kind of like, how do you set a timeline for yourself for like building and launching and things like that?
Yes.
The honest truth, right, is, and I think this, I'll go into this in a second, but it's with startups, you're really just trying to launch as soon as possible. That's the main goal, right? Like get some version of the product out there as soon as possible. It shouldn't take a year. It's hopefully, I think one thing that, you know, the main YC partner told us is if it takes more than if it takes more than a month to have some sort of product that people can use, then rethink your MVP, right? Any MVP should only take a month. Even if the MVP is literally just a UI and everything else is done manually on your end, right? Like, for example, an MVP for Uber could just be a UI for Uber, and then on your end, you're tracking each of the requests and matching cars and people, right? Something really terrible like that. But the main thing is to figure out the timeline for how you want to do your startup you have to know how soon you can tell if it's a bad idea, right? And the only way you can tell if it's a bad idea is if you have a product that people can use. So really the timeline for startups is launch as soon as possible, preferably within a month. And then based on what customers are doing, you try to create your next timeline off of that, whether it's maybe you should pivot or iterate, or maybe you should try to grow and get more customers, right? But the other kind of timeline-based thing for startups is a good rule of thumb post-launch is you want to try to grow 7% every week, at least for the first couple of months. And the reason that's nice is it gives you a new challenge every week, right? If you have one customer the first week, growing 7% is essentially still one customer. Maybe let's just call it another customer, right? So you just have to figure out how can I get one more customer this week? Let me email 100 people. If one of them responds, I can get another customer. Once you have 100 customers, you have to try to get 7 new customers. So that's a different strategy. You can't just email 100 people. You have to try to do some marketing. You have to try to talk to these initial 100 customers and figure out how to get more. And so instead of really having a timeline of like hit this by this date, it's more about like every week, how can you grow what you already have? And so that's kind of the mentality that we've been trying to adopt as far as, making timelines for ourselves. If that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. What about the team? Do you have a team for this type of gallery?
So right now our team for doing every single thing is just us two, right? So Vignesh codes 24/7, and I am constantly on LinkedIn, constantly on email, constantly on sales calls. And none of this is my background, right? I mean, I graduated in computer science, only did kind of engineering and quant internships. I had to learn sales, right? I had to learn all of this. And, these are, I think I have a bit of a part of the presentation here on this, but I think this was the hardest part, right? Because I think probably everybody on this call has never been a salesperson. And probably everybody on this call has hated a salesperson at one point or another, right? Most people hate getting those cold emails. Most people kind of hate being sold to, being told what their problems are. And so when you have to be that person, right? When you have to send out those emails, it feels terrible. Right. You just hate being that slimy, but it really is a learned skill. And I think it's very important for everybody doing a startup to do the sales themselves for a period, because getting all of those rejections, right, putting yourself out there and having to really defend your product in the public is a great way for you to build that thick skin and to really build conviction in your product. And you'd be surprised a lot of the cold email responses I get where people are like, I'll call I'll report you, I'll sue you for contacting me unprompted and things like that. And obviously you should never like spam people, but yeah, at the moment it's just us two, and it's been quite a bit to learn to do that. But it's good not to build a sales team until you know that you have product market fit and you know exactly how to sell your product.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think, Jagat, the way you approach plus being a co-founder, you are the best salesperson. I think that's adds the value on that, because if you check also, not just sales, coming from engineering background, you really understand the engineering.
Exactly.
Talking engineer, it may end up as opportunity and selling or any other type of collaboration, but that's, I think, the approach you took, and it wasn't really thing that I would scale, and I think I saw that. So you guys are doing great there over there. So just keep doing what you're doing. But there will be always obviously people, because I also understand from that perspective, because you are getting so many products out there and they're just getting reached to you, picking. So you have to be finding a way that for that people, what's a priority to be in that list. And I think there will obviously be kind of trade-offs, and I think the success rate always won't be 100%, but you should just keep doing that. So.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you for that, for sure. But yeah, I definitely think it's important for founder-led sales. Yeah, also because it's an engineering consultation, right? And engineers are always willing to talk to people who are technically minded and willing to solve problems. And I think that's really what sales is about in the end. It's about trying to solve people's problems. And so, yeah, this next part is, at this point, we had an idea for Gallery. And at this point in this general structure, you probably have some idea that you think might be good. You talk to people, somebody's willing to pay. Now, how are you going to build it and grow it, right? How are you going to make the actual product and do so properly? And I think one of the first things that this is like Y-Combinator's biggest mantra, right, is launch early and often, right? Launch earlier than you think you need to launch. Make anything. Just tell yourself whatever you can build in a month, that's what you're going to launch. It doesn't matter how much of it is even technical. You could literally just have a UI. You literally just have a landing page and launch that. But only through launching and seeing how customers interact can you truly tell how good your idea is. And on that point, it's fine if your first idea or your first solution is complete garbage, right? Build garbage so that you have something to iterate off of. And for this, I think one thing I always like to see is Airbnb's first landing page, right? It looks completely terrible, right? And actually, you know, on the back end, very little of it was automated, right? Literally Brian Chesky and these other people were manually, you know, going house to house, taking pictures for each of their customers, putting them on the site and creating every single posting, and then matching every single client to every single posting and things like that, right? Obviously, this is not a scalable business, but through this, they were able to tell that people actually did want to stay at other people's houses. And that was the most valuable part of this, right? The point of this MVP was not to be functional. The point of this MVP was, is anybody going to book a house, right? Is anybody going to book somebody else's room? And by making this little landing page, which probably only took them a few weeks at most, they were able to find that out and happen upon this billion-dollar market, $100 billion market now, in fact, right? And so this is something that I always found counterintuitive and something that we never really listened to, right? We'd always just keep building until we had a very polished product, especially when we're selling a DevOps SaaS, right? If you're going to be implementing a DevOps product in your own organization and it looks like this, you're probably going to pass, right? I mean, you don't want to be putting some sort of malware on your infrastructure, but you know, the truth is, if people really do want a solution, if this really is a problem that's plaguing people, they will use a site like this, right? And that's something that I never really believed, but I realized that's actually true. And that's something that, you know, in the startup community, they keep trying to, you know, hammer into us, is that if people are willing to use garbage, then you have a real problem on your hands. But if people keep telling you they want this feature and that feature, or better UI and stuff like that, then you're only just going to build a very bloated piece of software that nobody's going to use. And that's the worst thing to do, because then you waste time and you also end up with no customers. Right. And I duplicated the slide here because I think it's very important, but seek payment early and always. Even if your site looks like this, seek payment. And now, you know, the next part here is raising and making money, right? And I think, you know, before I go into this, also, you know, like to open the floor for questions. And also about this part, I think this part's pretty open-ended, right? Because we just finished our fundraise and now we're trying to scale up our sales. And so there are two sides to this, right? And I think the fundraising part may not be as interesting. I think it's more about like how, as somebody who's never sold a product before, do you get people to use what you've built? And, you know, I'll go into that in a second in this section. But first, yeah, just about kind of building garbage and putting it out there. If there are any questions around that, anything you want to know about how we did it for Gallery, I'm happy to go into that.
I think regarding the fundraising would be interesting, Jared, what the investors were looking for, and in that early stage, from the Gallery perspective, what was the point, what's the selling point that you were able to convince? And
Yeah. And so I can talk quickly about kind of like how I approach fundraising with Gallery, right? And so for a bit of context, kind of contextualizing this journey again, right? So when Vignesh and I, we were in YCombinator, we had all these bad ideas. We finally settled on Gallery as a space, right? We did all of these customer interviews and we had a timeline here, right? Because we had to fundraise at the end of YCombinator. So we had about a month to go. We still had a vague idea of what Gallery would be, but we didn't know yet, right? And so we were still talking to as many people as we could, figuring out the specs for this product, trying to, you know, do soft launches where we'd make landing pages and see if people were interested. And when it came time to fundraise, right, we had maybe like 2 design partners, right? Just small companies in YCombinator, like 2 or 3 engineers. These were barely even real sales, right? And we had to try to pitch to investors to raise, you know, over $1 million, right? And at first, this seemed ludicrous to me, right? It was like, who would be willing to invest so much money in something that has no customers, the product barely even exists, right? And I think the main thing is, you know, this doesn't have to do with this slide really, but the first thing is that, you know, if you can communicate the problem and the solution and your ability to understand both of those, then that helps a long way in raising money, right? Because building takes what? Building takes like a month or 2, right? So if you're just a month or 2 behind the curve as far as having those customers, nobody really cares, right? Because at the end of the day, if you can get in early, you can get more of the company for your dollar, right? So people are fine if you don't have a product yet, because that just means that they can get more of the company for every dollar that they put in, right? And so it's totally possible and doable. In fact, we did it to raise money pre-product. And the main way to do that is to really sell the problem, right? Really tell them how big this market is. And kind of going back to that scoring ideas template, it's really about hitting those 4 points, right? Tell them how huge this market is, so that when this product is built, you can just grow it without bound. Tell them how close of a fit you have with this market, right? Tell them how you've experienced the problem, how you've built solutions like this in the past, and how once this is built, you know exactly how to get it to people. Tell them how easy it is to get off of the ground, right? Oversell it, in fact, right? And I think all this kind of goes on to the next slide, really, which is most things won't be figured out, especially when you're doing a seed fundraise. Just pretend they are, right? When we were fundraising for Gallery, we honestly didn't even know most of the specifics of the product, right? Most times investors would ask us a question, we would think about it, and then we would say, yes, that feature will exist in the product, right? Because it's such a vague state, right? But at the end of the day, many times investors are investing in you, right? They're investing in your commitment to try to build something great, build something bigger than yourself, and to commit yourself to, growing a company. And so as long as you exude that confidence, right? As long as you make it look like everything's figured out, even when on the inside, you're like, I agree with this investor about all these objections, then, that helps you a long way in having great investor meetings and in raising money. And the next thing here is to leverage FOMO, right? So FOMO is fear of missing out. And the thing about investors is, at least in our experience, our limited experience in doing some seed investor calls, is the moment they know that somebody good is getting on board, or the moment it looks like you're getting fundraising traction, they don't really care what your idea is or what traction you have or things like that. They just feel the need to put in money before other people do. And so we had actually very little fundraising traction, but we tried to make it look like we had a lot of fundraising traction, right? We did little tricks here and there where we would say like, oh, in the past week we raised this much when we actually raised it within the past month and stuff like that, right? And by doing that, it gets the investors scared. It makes them want to put in money and things like that, right? So this is all more of a psychological game than kind of something like Shark Tank, which is what I thought it would be, right? Where you're kind of, pitching these investors and they're asking you hard-hitting questions about revenue. It really isn't like that. It's really just about they're trying to assess how excited you are about this idea, and you're trying to just make them see dollar signs as far as how big this market could be and how confident you are and how many other people want to be involved in your business. And, the final thing, which is obvious, but can really get to you during fundraising, right? Nobody knows what a good startup looks like, right? From what I've heard, right, like tons of YC startups that raise their seed from the top VCs, right, like from the Sequoias and the Andreessen Horowitzes, lots of them just fail. Whereas many of the hits of YC, right, things like DoorDash and Airbnb and things like that, they all raised from, almost unheard of VCs, right? They were not considered the hot ideas, things like Segments, right, and Amplitude and all these sorts of things, right? And so at the end of the day, the only point of raising investor capital is to bootstrap your business. That's all. It doesn't matter who the person is. Money is money, right? $1 from this VC is the same as $1 that, I pick up off the ground, right? And so at the end of the day, nobody, not even yourself, knows what a good startup looks like. The only way to know if a startup is good is to see if people are buying it. And I mean, that's the whole point of everything, right? And so at this point with Gallery, we've raised our seed. And to be honest, we don't know if Gallery is a good startup. We told our investors that it is, but we don't know, right? And the way we're trying to figure that out is just by selling, by talking to customers, and by really trying to solve a problem in this niche space of DevOps within environments, by building environments as a service. And we're having some good early traction. I hope we can really grow from here. But this is everything I've learned in the past year trying to bootstrap this cool idea. And I really hope it takes off. But worst case, if it doesn't, I know I'll have a lot more slides to add to this deck and hopefully tell you guys soon. And yeah, that pretty much concludes my talk. This is a small list of the many people I stole from to make this talk, and I highly suggest you guys look into these resources. These are 2 YC talks on pivoting and getting startup ideas that I took a lot of the material I got from. And this is the book, The Mom Test. I highly recommend you read it. Even if you're not thinking of doing a startup, it's a great way to figure out just how to assess problems and how to communicate with people. It really was incredibly valuable for us in coming up with a good idea and validating it. But yeah, that kind of concludes my talk here. Happy to go over to Q&A, to discussions, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jagger. I think we haven't touched much about the gallery, what it's doing, maybe, or as a short demo. I think that would be also interesting for the folks. And I have seen a bit, but I think that would be nice if you guys ready. How you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to launch into the the thing we've actually been building. So let me sorry, I think I'm resharing that by accident. Let me quickly open up gallery.
One thing I can validate also, being in a while in a DevOps space, I don't know, looks like you guys really touched to the point, because working also in OpenGov in Gladly, there was always need for that environment, but there was some in custom solution in a way, but there wasn't really something that product. So it's definitely a niche space. I can validate as engineer. So.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I think one of the things that, is a challenge for us a lot of times is the fact that many people have some sort of flow that built out in-house. Not the most scalable flows, but still something that will work for the time being. So you always have to try to sell to people when they're at that point where the thing they have is currently breaking and they're looking for the next way to improve it. Here, I can share gallery. Yeah. So so this is gallery, right? In gallery provides cloud environments as a service, right? So essentially you just link your infrastructure as a template and you're able to spin up new environments on demand, ad hoc, limitlessly on your own infrastructure, right? So for example, you could create cloud environments per pull request to host full stack feature previews. Or in a single click, you could just create a new environment, say for a client or something, and show them a feature preview. And you can use our CLI to create environments. Plus, we have a GraphQL API that treats environments as first class. So you can programmatically create and destroy environments. So for example, as part of a CI pipeline, you can run a script that will create an environment, run end-to-end testing, and then spin that environment down programmatically. And so I'll go into kind of how Gallery works, right? So here I'll show you the flow of how, if you want to onboard your infrastructure onto Gallery, you can create environments per pull request in minutes. And so here, for example, I could just create a template. Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
And so a template is a record of all the services that are in your cloud project, right? So the way we structured Gallery, we use templates to know how to spin up environments and what environments we want to spin up. And so one way you can add a template within Gallery is through Terraform, if you maintain an infrastructure through infrastructure as code. And so, for example, you could just link a repo containing Terraform files. And Gallery will pull all of the services that should spin up from there. And then you just have to indicate the build instructions. So you just choose the repo that you want to build. And then within that repo, we have a YAML file with the build instructions. So then the Gallery deployer will be able to immediately build this environment. And finally, in just minutes, we're able to set up the triggers. So let's say every pull request, let's try to spin up this environment. So I just choose my repo. I'll say all pull requests. And great. Now let's see this in action. All right, let's say I make a pull request to that repo. Let me quickly open that repo up. Sorry, 1 second. Let me open up GitHub. So let's say I add a file. And look, yeah, we have like multiple triggers to this, but yeah, every single thing will start creating its own environment for this PR. And I can head over to the environments here. Let me just share that window with Gallery again. Yeah, I can hover to environments, and I can see that it's starting to spin up these PR environments. Now, if I actually go to a PR environment, I can see the full stack feature preview. I can view the build logs. And in one click, I can just delete this environment. It'll also delete immediately on the merge of the PR. And so yeah, that's, for example, a demo on how immediately, if I maintain my infra using Terraform, I can set up environments per pull request. I could also just spin up an environment in one click. And it'll start building. And I can also, there's an advanced feature we built in where we can cache certain services. So for example, if you're spinning up RDS or some other intensive services like a database or something, instead of having to wait 30 minutes for your environment to spin up, we can just have copies of RDS that are waiting, like snapshots, and then each environment will point to the database when it's spun up. So then it'll be almost immediate. And this is an example, of getting from customer feedback. What are the pain points they're still having when they use the product? One of the things is longstanding environments. We come up with a solution. And so, yeah, all that to say, Gallery is meant to really supercharge development, right? But not making teams have to worry about the number of environments they have or bottlenecking on existing environments. And it helps them really grow their teams from, one of our potential customers is going from 30 to 300 engineers in a matter of a year. And, when they're scaling a team that much, they need a really flexible environment workflow that they can, use to build. And that's what, Gallery aims to provide. And yeah, this is not kind of my typical sales pitch, I guess, because usually what I do is I talk to the customer, come up with a list of their needs, and then make something tailored based off of that. But this is just a bit of a look at the product based on, to give you a better sense of what we're building and the problem we're tackling. And yeah, happy to take feedback, on the product and on those needs too.
Beautiful. So I think I was just going through all the website. Looks right now there is no self-try mode. Like, just is it?
Yeah, so we are building out the self-service mode. We actually have, it is technically functional right now, but we're trying to kind of test it a bit more before we let people use it, because we don't want people to kind of use it and then have a bad experience and then, not sign up with us. So right now we are still kind of just doing it per call. But yeah, if anybody here wants to try it out, we're happy to send over a link to the self-service flow, as well as we have some other resources that you can use to check out the product, including our docs, demo video, and a read-only account where you can just kind of click around but not make environments.
Nice. Yeah, I think it will be great to, I think what we were discussing a bit, we can go deep dive. But in general, from that point of view, how you feel, so because now you have this sit down, so moving forward, how it's look like for are you starting to build engineering team around and
yeah. So right now we're actually starting to hire our first engineers, our founding engineers, using our seed funding. We'll probably hire like 1 or 2, and then hopefully that'll keep us going until our Series A target. And then at that point, we'd probably try to hire out like sales team and product and stuff like that. But yeah, really right now, Vignesh and I'm sort of starting to join engineering, but he's the only person who's been coding this entire product. So really kudos to him for being able to make all this, for sure.
I could see the bed in his background. It's really good sign that pretty much he does all day. Sleep code.
Yeah.
Nice. Just curious the reasoning that, so usually also you want to go outside of also US, build bigger team because the cost of the engineering is lower, but you mentioned 1 or 2. I feel like you more prefer to grow slowly, but kind of adding more experienced people sounded to me.
Yeah, so generally, we've seen 2 approaches, right? Some people, they immediately try to hire like larger teams, mainly through like contractors outside the US, especially just to develop the product and things like that. One thing, we've kind of seen recommended, one thing we've kind of seen successful in the past is trying to build a small team very intentionally, and one that you can have kind of like high touch point with, right? So we're actually trying to do in-person / hybrid when we start hiring, mainly because we like the high bandwidth of communication for a startup. And we want somebody who, given that we can interact with them in person, and also who we know can't just like do coding tasks, but can also kind of be a fellow founder, where like make strategic decisions on what to build, see customer feedback, come with good ideas for how to optimize the product and things like that. And so I think really having like one of these sort of 10x engineers slash like fellow founders is a lot more useful than having kind of 5 to 10 contractors who are really only working for, you know, the hourly rate or whatever, but not really invested in the outcome of the product and the growth of the company.
Yeah, that's I like it. So it's really great approach today, because as you mentioned, there are two, but if you're especially building the core product and infrastructure piece, you definitely want to talk and hire this build a team that who actually have done through. Yes, time is money too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So folks, I am not sure if you have any questions regarding the product. Now you hear the story and the product itself. Yeah, I think then I can have a follow-up. So regarding the story, because getting to YC was also not easy.
Yeah.
When you were like this making this pivot and decision, and how was like how was the perception, and how you were able, is it like you need to go to that and commit, or were they more supporting on that, and what was it, how was looking the transition?
Yeah. So a bit of a background on the whole YC thing. So like we applied to YC with a very different product, which was the e-commerce thing, right? And this was also kind of pre-customer, right? This was just like solely the product, and they accepted us, but you know, when we talked to them, they told us like, we don't quite know if this idea is the best, but we trust that you two are going to be able to quickly build new things and quickly talk to customers and make something that works, right? And so they were very, very supportive of us as far as, you know, pivoting and coming up with new ideas, trying different, you know, customer bases and products. And you know, they're very also non-judgmental. Even when we had like very bad ideas, they would still help us kind of like talk through those and come up with things. So yeah, at the end of the day, YC was very supportive and very indicative of the fact that they kind of invested in us as founders instead of kind of investing in a specific idea. And without them, we definitely would not have been able to get anywhere close to where we are as far as raising our seed or even making Gallery and having access to tons of customers and people to talk to.
I think the next question would be, why even startup? You guys both were working and quite successful in due diligence in these big companies, and what was the reason, like main motivation?
You know, we asked ourselves that question a lot. No, I'm joking. It's I think a big reason we did it, right, is so, you know, we worked at these larger tech companies and I worked in like finance, things like that. And I think one of the most important things to me personally, right, was the ability to have ownership over an entire idea, right? The ability to kind of build something in a small team and bring it to market and truly pioneer its growth, right? I think that's definitely the biggest challenge, but I think that's also one of the most like exciting parts about really owning a product, right? Because I think in a lot of these tech companies where I worked, right, I felt kind of like a cog in the wheel, right? Like at the end of the day, it was the business impact was somewhat marginal. It would all be about like tracing up to the stock price. And even though, for example, at Facebook, they have like billions of users, I would only get to work on a small part of a product, right? For example, like I work kind of like on the ML infrastructure pipelines and things like that, right? And I really wanted to see, you know, how did they figure out that these ML infrastructure pipelines were in need, and how do they figure out like how to grow new products that Facebook puts out, right? And I think really having that end-to-end challenge is something that's exciting to me, and something that really now more than ever we live in a world, especially in the Bay Area, where capital is abundant, and if you do want to take, you know, undertake that challenge, people are willing to support you on that journey. And so, you know, given the ability that I had the privilege to access capital and to try to bootstrap something on my own, I felt like it was an opportunity I couldn't give up, and something that'd be far more fulfilling than kind of sitting and working on some sort of slice of a product within a larger organization. Yeah.
Nice. So I hear two things, like what makes you happy and the impact you have. I guess that's.
Yeah. I think those were honestly two of the biggest things. And I think the last thing is just how quickly can I learn, right? I think really what we're doing right now is optimizing for learning and growing as far as people and the company. Right. And I think nothing helps you learn and grow faster than failing every day. And so I think that's something you can only really do in a start. If you fail every day at Facebook, you're just gonna get fired. So yeah.
How about you, Vignesh? Maybe
Yeah,
something.
I think that sort of thinking is pretty much why I got into this as well. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I was sort of surrounded by this kind of culture from an early age. So I've always sort of been inclined towards like entrepreneurship and like being focused towards like solving a problem rather than just sort of making micro improvements to like an existing product. So I think like that's sort of always been where I've gravitated towards, which is why yeah, that's sort of why I chose this path.
Actually interesting now, because now the space becoming overcrowded, and I see more people also giving up and going to big, because I had quite a few also friends that they started in big companies, they switched to, and then they kind of give up and get back to. So that's kind of pattern also I've seen, that because the big companies, they keep increasing the buyer, like the pay raise and all this stuff, and having this going in startup journey taking longer and longer time, and all these different challenges. But definitely in the end of the day, it comes what you're really up to, stand for, and the execution. So
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
like yeah, I think one of the things YC sort of talks about is like the number one cause of startup failure is just like the founders giving up. So
yeah.
I guess like the number one thing sort of is you gotta just be locked in for the long run, even if things are going badly, and hope, and then just hope for the best, I guess.
I see. But I would think that also getting back to YC, it also should help a lot in B2B business, especially.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it builds credibility, for sure, and it gives you access to a large network of past YC companies and past YC founders for building new companies and things like that. So, because I think one of the big things is when you have this kind of shitty initial product and you're trying to get it out to people, you need a bit of sympathy for somebody to at least listen to you and then maybe adopt it, and even if it isn't the best. I think having that community of fellow founders who have been in those shoes, many times are willing to offer that sympathy to get you off the ground.
Yeah, definitely. That was helped for, I think, build that credibility, what you mentioned, and looking at the profile coming from engineering background. I think that was the thing, because you have to be in that space and understand and build that product, because otherwise it's gonna be kind of hard to really understand that the development. That was a thing. But regarding the product itself, I have a question that, so now is it with GitHub Actions? So it's definitely going to be part of the CI/CD, yeah? Like, do you build this integration with all this CI tooling, or how it's gonna, what's in the maybe roadmap? We can.
Yeah, so right now we have the GraphQL API so that you can sort of manually integrate with these sorts of tools by writing just like really small scripts to do to sort of integrate with your workflows. As we sort of grow it to customers who sort of have feature requests around like more targeted workflows, we'll start building those as well. So like for example, if teams sort of don't want to build out a like a thin wrapper to like integrate with GitHub Actions, that's something like we can build for them and then sell that as part of our product. Right now we're trying to sort of target people who really like need the solution, like Jagat said, and like are willing to sort of put up with the minor annoyances of having like just using the core product and sort of the features that it provides. And then as we grow, we're going to sort of tack on more quality of life features to help these companies sort of integrate more easily and improve the onboarding process and stuff like that.
Nice. And I guess how soon we can see for this tryout for the open source projects, if you guys have any plan or so.
Yeah, I mean it's really in a usable state right now. So that's like it's still in a state where you have to sort of talk to us and we'll do like a more hands-on onboarding as part of it, but it is in a state that it's sort of ready to try out for anyone. It's just like the self-service flow is just because of the complexity of the product, the self-service flow is a little bit, I think it's hard to grasp because of the complexity. Like you have to link your cloud account, you have to link your Git account. And it's good to sort of have us walk you through the initial onboarding process, which is why we haven't like fully enabled self-service yet. But in terms of usability, the feature set is all there. It's more about like the flow of onboarding onto the product is something that's sort of lagging behind the feature set at this point.
Sounds great. I think we can slowly wrap it up, unless you guys want anything.
Oh yeah, it sounds great. Yeah.
So definitely we can have a follow-up because, as I mentioned, it's as engineer, it's interesting for me, and definitely I'm sure there'll be folks reaching out after and once we share the recording, and definitely going to be one of the things to forward to you guys if people gonna look for. But this open source piece will help because you have so many DevOps engineers playing with the tools, and definitely should end up in the list. And we're planning also to do some with around sample application of DevOps as open source, because there are so many tooling and then picking up and putting things together. And yeah, the gallery looking forward to be land there as well. So again, it's just good starting to a bit better understand and to know you guys and building this relationship between in personal level and also with community. And because we also now we started the chapter, obviously we gonna be heavily focused on this chapter as well, and for the DevOps piece, and always you'll be more than welcome to come back and share the product news. And yeah, that's
absolutely,
that's kind of, we are in still an early stage of the journey. Thank you so much once again to spending your Sunday talking about the thing that you guys are passionate. I put here shared your LinkedIn account, and if folks later gonna get back to you, and I will say that it can be related to the startup experience if you guys in the same journey or the product itself, if you want to try it out. And based on Jagat and what Vignesh mentioned, it's going to be also soon be self-served. But meanwhile, if you really want to give a try, feel free to reach them out. And yeah, that's about it. And obviously, we just put things together. It's more, we always look for volunteers to come and contribute in a way you guys want to do for the project itself. And thank you once again, Jagat and Vignesh. I hope you can take a bit break today, and probably you were working quite hard for a couple months or weeks, and just beautiful weather here in SF. So get some time and fresh start from the coming week.
Will do, yeah. And happy birthday to you. Hope you have a good day too.
Yeah, it was an amazing start, and definitely one of the memorable birthday I'm gonna have in a while.
Great.
And
thank you very much, Shagar, for organizing this meeting, and also thank you guys for your time. It was nice and informative. Definitely, I will have some questions to you later. So I will send you a request from LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So once again, to repeat, we're gonna have this, there are so many folks coming to DevOps, we're gonna have this sample application, and this recording this gonna be as a good as a reference for
Okay.
the starters. But at the same time, if you will have any other place or the educative or documents, and once you have in the
Yeah,
website, you will be able to definitely add the link in the on the recording. So I know the documentation usually comes a bit later.
Yeah.
But we'll be happy more than after that to keep sharing that.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, I can send you the materials. Great. Thank you.
Awesome. See you guys.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you.